Hi guys, today I'm going to read chapter 22 to you because there's a couple points that we want to make sure that we discuss. As I'm reading it to you and you're listening, please make sure that you're following along in your book. Chapter 22 in this book starts on page 284. Chapter 22. It was Jim's turn to cry. His face was streaked with angry tears as he made his way through the cheerful crowd. "It ain't right," he muttered, all the way to the corner of the square where he found Atticus waiting. Atticus was standing under the streetlight, looking as though nothing had happened. His vest was buttoned, his collar and tie were neatly in place, his watch chain glistened. He was his impassive self again. "It ain't right, Atticus," said Jim. "No, son, it's not right." We walked home. Aunt Alexandra was waiting. She was in her dressing gown, and I could have sworn she had on her corset underneath it. "I'm sorry, brother," she murmured. Having never heard her call Atticus brother before, I stole a glance at Jim, but he was not listening. He would look up at Atticus, then down at the floor, and I wondered if he thought Atticus somehow responsible for Tom Robinson's conviction. "Is he all right?" Auntie asked, indicating Jim. "He'll be so presently," said Atticus. "It was a little too strong for him." Our father sighed. "I'm going to bed," he said. "If I don't wake up in the morning, don't call me." I didn't think it was wise in the first place to let them. "This is their home, sister," said Atticus. "We made it this way for them, and they might as well learn to cope with it. But they don't have to go to the courthouse and wallow in it. It's just as much Maycomb as missionary teas." Atticus and Alexander's eyes were anxious. "You are the last person I thought would turn bitter over this." "I'm not bitter, just tired. I'm going to bed." "Atticus," said Jim bleakly. He turned in the doorway. "What, son? How could they do it? How could they?" "I don't know, but they did it. They've done it before, and they did it tonight, and they'll do it again. When they do it, seems that only children weep. Good night." But things are always better in the morning. Atticus rose at his usual ungodly hour and was in the living room behind the Mobile Register when he stumbled in. Jim's morning face posed the question his sleepy lips struggled to ask. "It's not time to worry yet," Atticus reassured him as we went to the dining room. We're not through yet. There'll be an appeal. You can count on that." "Gracious alive, Cal, what's all this?" He was staring at his breakfast plate. "Calpurnia said Tom Robinson's daddy sent you along this chicken this morning. I fixed it. You tell him I'm proud to get it, but they don't have chicken for breakfast at the White House." "What are these?" "Rolls," said Calpurnia. "Estella down at the hotel sent them." Atticus looked up at her puzzled, and she said, "You'd better step out here and see what's in the kitchen, Mr. Finch." We followed him. The kitchen table was loaded with enough food to bury the family. Hunks of salt pork, tomatoes, beans, even scuppernogs. Atticus grinned when he found a jar of pickled pig's knuckles. "Reckon Auntie'll let me eat these in the dining room?" Calpurnia said, "This is all around the back steps when I got here this morning. They appreciate what you did, Mr. Finch. They aren't a step in themselves, are they?" Atticus's eyes filled with tears. He did not speak for a moment. "Tell them I'm very grateful," he said. Tell them they must never do this again. Times are too hard." He left the kitchen, went in the dining room, and excused himself to Aunt Alexandra, put on his hat, and went to town. So people that were from the Black community wanted to pay respect to Atticus, and the only way that they really could do that was by giving him stuff, kind of like Walter Cunningham did for him earlier in the book. And so it's kind of their same way of saying thank you. It's the best way they can say thank you because they have no other way to say thank you. And so they gave him food and elaborate things that, or not necessarily elaborate things, but things that were meant a lot because it was a big chore for them to give those things up because they need them more probably than Atticus did, but they wanted to show their affection for him. We heard Dill's step in the hall, so Calpurnia left Atticus' uneaten breakfast at the table. Between rabbit bites, Dill told us Miss Rachel's reaction to last night, which was, if a man like Atticus Finch wants to butt his head against a stone wall, it's his head. "I'd to get her told," growled Dill, gnawing a chicken leg, "but she didn't look much like telling this morning. Said she was up half the night wondering where I was. Said she had the sheriff after me, but he was at the hearing." "Dill, you've got to stop going off without telling her," said Jim. "It just aggravates her." Dill sighed patiently. "I told her till I was blue in the face where I was going. She just seeing too many snakes in the closet. Bet that woman drinks a pint for breakfast every morning. No, she drinks 2 glasses full. Seen her." "Don't talk like that, Dill," said Aunt Alexandra. "It's not becoming of a child. It's cynical." "It ain't cynical, Miss Alexandra. Telling the truth's not cynical, is it?" "The way you tell it, it is." Jim's eyes flashed at her, but he said to Dill, "Let's go. You can take that runner with you." When we went to the front porch, Miss Stephanie Crawford was busy telling it to Miss Maudie Atkins and Mr. Avery. They looked around at us and went on talking. Jim made a feral noise in his throat. I wished for a weapon. "I hate grown folks looking at you," said Dill. "Makes you feel like you've done something." Miss Maudie yelled for Jim Finch to come there. Jim groaned and heaved himself up from the swing. "We'll go with you," Dill said. Miss Stephanie's voice quivered with curiosity. She wanted to know who all gave us permission to go to the court. She didn't see us, but it was all over town this morning that we were in the color balcony. Did Atticus put us up there as a sort of, wasn't it right close up there with all those? Did Scout understand all that? Didn't it make us mad to see our daddy beat? "Hush, Stephanie," Miss Maudie's diction was deadly. I've not got all morning to pass on the porch. Jim Finch, I called to find out if you and your colleagues can eat some cake. Got up at 5 to make it, so you better say yes. Excuse me, Stephanie. Good morning, Mr. Avery. There was a big cake and 2 little ones on Miss Maudie's kitchen table. There should have been 3 little ones. It was not like Miss Maudie to forget Dill, and we must have shown it. But we understood when she cut from the big cake and gave the slice to Jim. So this is one way of Miss Maudie trying to, she knows the kids probably are struggling a little bit, especially Jim, and so she's trying to help them out by giving them the cake to kind of cheer them up. And it's also significant that she gives Jim a slice from the big cake, which again symbolizes his adulthood. He's moving into adulthood. He doesn't get the little cakes like the 2 kids do, but he can take a slice from the big cake just like the adults would do. So again, it symbolizes him growing. As we ate, we sensed that this was Miss Maudie's way of saying that as far as she was concerned, nothing had changed. She sat quiet in the kitchen chair watching us. Suddenly she spoke. "Don't fret, Jim. Things are never as bad as they seem." Indoors, when Miss Maudie wanted to say something lengthy, she spread her fingers on her knees and settled her bridge work. This she did, and we waited. "I simply want to tell you that there are some men in this world who were born to do unpleasant jobs for us. Your father's one of them." "Oh," said Jim. "Well, don't you well me, sir," Mrs. Maudie replied, recognizing Jim's fatalistic noises. "You are not old enough to appreciate what I said." Jim was staring at his half-eaten cake. "It's like being a caterpillar in a cocoon, that's what it is," he said, "like something asleep wrapped up in a warm place. I always thought Maycomb folks were the best folks in the world, at least that's what they seem like." "We're the safest folks in the world," said Miss Maudie. "We're so rarely called on to be Christians, but when we are, we've got men like Atticus to go for us." Jim grinned ruefully. "Wish the rest of the county thought that. You'd be surprised how many of us do." "Who?" Jim's voice rose. "Who in this town did one thing to help Tom Robinson? Just who? His colored friends, for one thing, and people like us, people like Judge Taylor, people like Mr. Heck Tate. Stop eating and start thinking, Jim. Did it ever strike you that Judge Taylor naming Atticus to defend that boy was no accident? That Judge Taylor might have had his reasons for naming him? This was a thought. Quarter-pointed defenses were usually given to Maxwell Green, Maycomb's latest addition to the bar, who needed the experience. Maxwell Green should have had Tom Robinson's case. "You think about that," Miss Maudie was saying. "It was no accident. I was sitting there on the porch last night waiting. I waited and I waited to see you all come down the sidewalk, and as I waited, I thought, Atticus Finch won't win. He can't win, but he's the only man in these parts who can keep a jury out so long in a case like that. And I thought to myself, well, we're making a step. It's just a baby step, but it's a step." So Jim is kind of having this awakening to what he's seeing the town now as an adult, and he compares it to a caterpillar in a cocoon, and so he sees it as a kid, and it seems like they're all the nicest people ever, and now he's waking up to see that maybe things aren't as fair in Maycomb as he thought they were, and he kind of has blonde blinders and doesn't think anybody helped Tom Robinson, but Miss Maudie is pointing out too, there's things that people did along the ways to help Tom Robinson that maybe weren't as blatant as Atticus were, but Atticus's was the largest. He had to do the most to help Tom Robinson. And so she's trying to show Jim that there is change. It's coming slowly, and it's maybe a baby step, but they're trying to change, and there are people who are willing to change and help. "That's all right to talk like that. Can't any Christian judges and lawyers make up for heathen juries?" Jim muttered. "As soon as I get grown." "That's something you have to take up with your father," Miss Maudie said. We went down Miss Maudie's cool new steps in the sunshine, found Mr. Avery and Miss Stephanie Crawford still at it. They moved down the sidewalk and were standing in front of Miss Stephanie's house. Miss Rachel was walking toward them. "Think I'll be a clown when I get grown," said Dill. Jim and I stopped in our tracks. "Yes, sir, a clown," he said. There ain't one thing in this world I can do about folks except laugh, so I'm gonna join the circus and laugh my head off. You got it backwards, Dill, said Jim. Clowns are sad. It's the folks that laugh at them. Well, I'm gonna be a new kind of clown. I'm gonna stand in the middle of the ring and laugh at folks. Just look yonder, he pointed. Every one of them ought to be riding broomsticks. Aunt Rachel already does. Miss Stephanie and Miss Rachel were waving wildly at us in a way that did not give the lie in Dill's observation. Oh gosh, breathed Jim. I reckon it'd be ugly not to see him. Something was wrong. Mr. Avery was red in the face from a sneezing spell and nearly blew us off the sidewalk when we came up. Miss Stephanie was trembling with excitement, and Miss Rachel caught Dill's shoulder. You get on the backyard and stay there, she said. There's a danger coming. What's the matter? I asked. Ain't you heard yet? It's all over town. At that moment, Alexander came to the door and called us, but she was too late. It was Miss Stephanie's pleasure to tell us this morning Mr. Bob Yule stopped Atticus on the post office corner, spat in his face, and told him he'd get him if it took the rest of his life. So that seems by Bob Yule talking like that seems like there's going to be some foreshadowing that Bob Yule's going to try to, do something to Atticus. Or it could just be that was his way of getting back at Atticus for defending Tom Robinson, is that he was just going to spit on his face and make an empty threat, essentially. So we'll have to see which way it goes.